The gunshot echoed through the dusty streets of Shafter, Texas, as Katherine Osborne's father collapsed to the ground, blood seeping through his white cotton shirt. It was in that terrible moment, as the dying banker's eyes met hers, that Katherine knew her world would never be the same, and that the town would never let her be with Ethan Steele, the very man who now pulled her away from the growing crowd, his calloused hand tight around her trembling one. "You need to go, Miss Katherine," Sheriff Briggs said, his weathered face grim in the harsh afternoon sunlight of July 1877. "Your father's affairs need seeing to, and there'll be questions about his dealings with the railroad." His eyes slid to Ethan, standing protectively beside her. "And you'd best keep your distance from that Steele boy. Nothing but trouble follows him." Katherine's tears blurred the sheriff's stern expression as she felt Ethan's body tense beside her. At 22, she had known Ethan for most of her life, but it was only in the past year that their childhood friendship had blossomed into something deeper, something her father had vehemently opposed. "She ain't going nowhere without me," Ethan said, his voice low but firm. At 25, he'd grown from the troublemaking son of the local blacksmith into a respected ranch hand who'd saved enough to buy his own small spread outside town. But to most of Shafter, he was still that wild Steele boy, too rough for a banker's daughter. "My father is dead," Katherine said, her voice breaking. "I have nowhere to go." The sheriff adjusted his hat, squinting at her. "Your father's sister in Boston has been telegraphed. She's arranging for you to travel east once the funeral's over. It's all been decided." "Decided by whom?" Katherine demanded, feeling Ethan's supportive hand on the small of her back. "By those who know what's best for a young lady of your position," Sheriff Briggs replied. "Now go home and prepare yourself. There's a town meeting tonight about the railway troubles, and folks aren't feeling kindly toward anyone connected to the bank right now." As Katherine and Ethan walked away from the growing crowd around her father's body, she could feel the hostile stares burning into her back. The railroad's expansion had divided Shafter, with her father supporting the company that many ranchers, including Ethan, claimed was stealing their land through dishonest means. "They can't make you leave," Ethan whispered as they reached the steps of her white clapboard house, the grandest in Shafter. "Not if you don't want to." Katherine clutched his rough hand, the same hands that could break a wild horse yet touch her cheek with such tenderness. "What choice do I have? My father's gone, the bank will be taken over, and this house." She looked up at the place she'd called home her entire life. "This house was never truly mine." Ethan's blue eyes darkened as he looked down at her. "Meet me tonight, after the town meeting. Midnight at the old oak beyond Miller's Creek." "Ethan, they'll never let us." "I ain't asking them," he said firmly. "I'm asking you, Katherine. Do you trust me?" She looked into his eyes, remembering how he'd taught her to ride when she was 10, how he'd brought her wildflowers every spring since she was 16, how he'd kissed her for the first time behind her father's bank just 6 months ago. "Yes," she whispered. "I trust you." He brushed a strand of chestnut hair from her face. "Then be ready at midnight. Pack only what you need. Nothing more." As darkness fell over Shafter that night, Katherine sat in her bedroom, listening to the voices drifting up from her father's study. Judge Hamilton, Mayor Prescott, and Sheriff Briggs spoke in low tones about securing the girl's future and protecting her inheritance. They spoke of her as if she were a child, or worse, a possession to be managed. "The Boston train leaves in 3 days," the judge was saying. "Her aunt is a respectable woman who will see her properly settled." "And what of the Steele boy?" the sheriff asked. "He won't let her go without a fight." "Then we ensure they don't meet before she leaves," the mayor replied. "Post a man outside her door tonight." Tomorrow we'll move her to the Prescott house where my wife can watch over her until departure. Catherine's heart raced as she silently opened her wardrobe and pulled out her plainest dress. She could take little with her, just her mother's locket, a small pouch of coins she'd saved from her allowance, and a photograph of her parents. Everything else would have to be left behind. As the clock downstairs chimed 11, she heard heavy footsteps on the stairs. A gentle knock came at her door. "Miss Osborne." It was Deputy Mills, young and awkward. "Sheriff asked me to check if you need anything before turning in." "I'm fine, thank you," she called, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "Just tired from this terrible day." "Yes, madam." "I'll be right outside if you need anything." Catherine waited, counting the minutes, until she heard the deputy's soft snoring outside her door. At 1:45, she eased open her window, thankful that her childhood climbing adventures with Ethan had prepared her for this moment. The trellis beside her window creaked but held as she descended, her small travel bag slung across her body. The night was moonless as she slipped through the shadows of Shafter, avoiding the lamplit Main Street where the town meeting was just breaking up. She could hear angry voices from the direction of the saloon, men arguing about the railroad and what would happen to the bank now that Harold Osborne was dead. Catherine reached Miller's Creek just as the church bell tolled midnight. Her heart pounded as she approached the ancient oak tree, its massive branches reaching into the darkness. For a moment, she feared Ethan wouldn't come, that he'd been prevented somehow, or worse, had changed his mind. Then she heard the soft nickering of horses. Ethan stepped from the shadows leading 2 horses. His Palomino, Thunder, and a smaller chestnut mare she recognized from his small ranch. "You came," he said, relief evident in his voice. "Did you doubt I would?" she asked, moving into his arms. He held her tightly, his face buried in her hair. "No, but I heard they posted a guard outside your room. Deputy Mills isn't known for his vigilance," she said with a small smile. Ethan helped her secure her bag to the mare's saddle. "We need to ride hard tonight. They'll come looking by dawn. Where are we going?" she asked, mounting the horse with practiced ease. Ethan swung onto Thunder's back, his tall frame silhouetted against the star-filled sky. "West. I have a friend in New Mexico territory who can help us. Then maybe California." "California," Catherine whispered, the word like a promise. "A place far from Shafter's judgments and expectations." "Are you sure about this, Catherine? Once we leave, there's no coming back, not to the life you knew." She looked back toward town, toward the house where she'd grown up, the bank her father had built, the society that had shaped her. Then she turned to Ethan, his face half hidden in shadow but his eyes catching what little light the stars provided. "The life I knew ended when my father died today," she said. "The life I want is with you." Ethan leaned over and kissed her, a gesture that sealed their pact. "Then let's ride." They urged their horses forward, away from Shafter, away from the only home either of them had ever known. As they crested the first hill, Catherine looked back one last time at the twinkling lights of the town below. Then she turned her face westward, toward whatever future awaited them, and never looked back again. The first rays of sunlight were breaking over the eastern horizon when Sheriff Briggs pounded on Judge Hamilton's door, his face flushed with anger and exhaustion. "She's gone," he announced when the judge appeared in his nightshirt. Katherine Osborne slipped out sometime after midnight. Deputy Mills was asleep at his post. "And Steele?" the judge asked, though he already knew the answer. "His foreman says he hasn't been at his ranch since yesterday afternoon. 2 horses are missing," Judge Hamilton cursed. "How far could they have gotten if they rode through the night? 20, maybe 30 miles west by now. Send a telegram to Sheriff Parker in El Paso. Have him watch the trails. and get a posse together. We can still catch them before they reach the New Mexico border." As the men of Shafter assembled, mounting horses and checking weapons, Katherine and Ethan pushed their mounts through a narrow mountain pass, having ridden without rest since leaving town. "We need to stop soon," Ethan said, eyeing Katherine's exhausted face. "The horses need water and you need rest." She nodded, too tired to argue. They found a small stream tucked in a sheltered canyon, far from the main trail. As the horses drank, Ethan built a small, smokeless fire and pulled jerky and hardtack from his saddlebags. "Not exactly the finest dining," he said apologetically, as he handed her the simple provisions. Katherine smiled. "Better than any dinner at the Prescott house." They ate in comfortable silence, the enormity of what they'd done settling over them. Katherine had left behind everything she knew: her home, her inheritance, her position in society. Ethan had abandoned the ranch he'd worked years to acquire, the reputation he'd struggled to build. "You regret it?" Ethan asked quietly, watching her face in the soft morning light. "No," she said without hesitation. "My father never approved of you, you know." Ethan nodded. "He made that clear enough." "He didn't know you," Katherine continued. "He saw the blacksmith's son, not the man you've become." She reached across and took his hand. "But I've always seen you, Ethan. Even when we were children." He squeezed her hand. "We should rest for a few hours. I'll take first watch." Katherine's exhaustion overwhelmed her, and she fell asleep almost instantly, using Ethan's folded jacket as a pillow. When she woke, the sun was high overhead and Ethan was crouched nearby, alert and watchful. "Someone's following us," he said quietly. "I spotted dust about an hour ago coming up from the east." Katherine's stomach tightened with fear. "The sheriff, probably. We need to move." They quickly packed their meager camp and mounted again, pushing deeper into the rugged terrain. Ethan led them off the main trail, following game paths and dry creek beds, doubling back occasionally to confuse their trail. By late afternoon, they reached a small trading post run by an elderly Mexican couple who regarded them with suspicious eyes. "We need supplies," Ethan explained in decent Spanish. "And information." The old man nodded toward their horses. "Those animals need rest, senor. And your woman looks ready to fall from the saddle." Katherine straightened her back, though exhaustion pulled at every muscle. "We're being followed." The woman exchanged a look with her husband. "Bandits, lawmen," Ethan answered. "From Shafter." Understanding dawned in the old couple's eyes. They'd seen young couples on the run before from family feuds, arranged marriages, or other troubles. "Come inside," the woman said. "My husband will take your horses to the back corral where they cannot be seen from the road." Inside the small adobe building, Katherine nearly wept with gratitude when the woman offered them a simple meal of beans, tortillas, and strong coffee. As they ate, Ethan explained their situation, careful to avoid mentioning Katherine's father's death or the bank controversy. "There is a rancher named Rodriguez 3 days' ride from here," the old man said when Ethan had finished. "He sometimes takes on workers. A gringo who can break horses would be valuable to him. And his wife often needs help with the household," the woman added, looking at Katherine's smooth hands. "Though you do not look like you have done much hard work, señorita." Katherine straightened. "I can learn." The old woman smiled. With love one can learn many things." They rested at the trading post until dusk, when the old man reported that a group of riders had passed on the main road, asking questions about a young couple. "I told them I saw no one," he said with a sly smile, "but they will keep looking." Ethan paid for their supplies with some of the money he'd brought. Precious little remained after their purchases. "We need to leave a false trail," he said as they prepared to depart. "Something to lead them away from our true direction." The old man nodded. My nephew is driving cattle to Fort Davis tomorrow. He could leave tracks suggesting you went south." That night, they rode under a sliver of moon, following the old man's directions toward the Rodriguez ranch. Catherine's body ached from 2 days of hard riding, but a new determination had taken root in her heart. This was their life now together, free from Shafter's expectations, but hunted and uncertain. "What if they never stop looking for us?" she asked as they made camp in a hidden ravine. Ethan built another small fire, his hands moving with practiced efficiency. "They will eventually. Sheriff Briggs won't waste resources forever, especially once we cross into New Mexico territory. And if they don't stop," he looked up at her, his face serious in the firelight, "then we keep going. California, Oregon, maybe even Canada if we have to." She nodded, feeling both terrified and exhilarated by the vastness of their potential future. "Ethan, there's something I need to tell you." He tensed slightly, setting down the coffee pot he'd been preparing. "My father," she began, her voice catching. "The day he died, he told me he was in trouble, the railroad money, some of it was missing. He said people would blame him, but that it wasn't his fault." Ethan moved to sit beside her. Who did he think was responsible? He didn't say. "But he was afraid, Ethan. I've never seen my father afraid before." Ethan was quiet for a long moment. "Did you tell the sheriff this?" She shook her head. "There wasn't time, and I didn't know who to trust." "Your father's death might not have been because of the land disputes," Ethan said thoughtfully. "If money was missing. You think someone killed him to hide the theft? It's possible. The shooting happened during that confrontation with the ranchers. It would have been easy for someone to take advantage of the chaos." Catherine's mind raced with this new perspective. "If we could prove who really stole the money, maybe we could go back someday." Ethan took her hand. "One problem at a time, Katherine. Right now, we need to focus on staying ahead of the posse and finding somewhere safe." She nodded, leaning against his shoulder. "I never thought I'd be an outlaw," he chuckled softly. "You're not an outlaw, you're a grown woman who made her own choice. There's no law against that, no matter what Shafter thinks." They slept in shifts again that night and rose before dawn to continue their journey. The terrain grew increasingly rugged as they followed the directions toward the Rodriguez ranch, climbing into higher elevations where pine trees replaced the scrub and cacti of the lower desert. On the afternoon of their third day of travel, they crested a hill and saw a sprawling ranch in the valley below adobe buildings surrounding a main house, cattle grazing in the distance, and fields of corn and beans near a creek that cut through the property. "That must be it," Ethan said, relief evident in his voice. As they approached, several ranch hands on horseback intercepted them, hands hovering near their weapons. "Quiane's son Usted's," one called out. "What do you want here?" Ethan raised his hand slightly. "We're looking for Senor Rodriguez. The traders at the post said he might have work." The men exchanged glances before one gestured for them to follow. They were led to the main house, where a broad-shouldered man in his 50s stood waiting, his dark eyes evaluating them carefully. "I am Antonio Rodriguez," he said in accented English. "Why do you come to my ranch?" Ethan dismounted and helped Katherine down, both of them swaying slightly with exhaustion. "My name is Ethan Steele, and this is Katherine Osborne. We're looking for work and a place to stay." Rodriguez's eyes narrowed. "You are running from something, no?" Katherine stepped forward. "Yes, sir, from people who would separate us." The rancher studied them for a long moment before a smile softened his weathered face. "Ah, love, it causes many troubles." He turned to his wife, who had appeared in the doorway. "Marisol, these young people need food and rest. Then we will talk of work." The next few days passed in a blur of exhausted sleep, simple but hearty meals, and cautious conversations with the Rodriguez family. They learned that Antonio had built his ranch from nothing after coming north from Mexico as a young man. He understood what it meant to start over, to build a life against the odds. "The boy knows horses," he told his wife after watching Ethan calm a nervous Mustang. "And the girl is willing to learn." Marisol nodded approvingly as Katherine helped prepare dinner, her banker's daughter hands blistered from unfamiliar work but never complaining. "They have heart, these two." A week passed, then two. Katherine and Ethan settled into the rhythm of ranch life, working from dawn until dusk. At night, they shared a small cabin on the edge of the property, falling asleep in each other's arms, too exhausted for much else but grateful for their safety and the growing acceptance of the Rodriguez family. On a Sunday afternoon, as the ranch workers enjoyed their day of rest, Antonio approached them as they sat beneath a cottonwood tree near the creek. "Riders came yesterday," he said without preamble. "Looking for a young couple from Texas." Katherine's heart lurched. "Did they describe us?" Antonio nodded. "A banker's daughter and a ranch hand. They offered money for information." Ethan stood, his body tense. "We'll leave tonight. We don't want to bring trouble to your family." The older man waved a dismissive hand. "I told them I had seen no such couple. That my workers are all Mexican, except for one old gringo who has been here for years." He smiled. "They believed me, I think, but they left word at all the ranches in the area to watch for you." Katherine felt the familiar fear returning. "They won't give up, will they?" "Perhaps not," Antonio agreed, "but I have been thinking. My cousin has a small ranch near Sacramento. California is far from Texas lawmen. He could use a good horse trainer." Hope flared in Ethan's eyes. "California, that's a long journey, But my oldest son leads a cattle drive to Santa Fe next week. You could travel with them, then take the stagecoach west." He looked between them. "Unless you wish to stay here, you are welcome, but I cannot promise your safety forever." That night, Katherine and Ethan discussed their options in the privacy of their small cabin. "California," Katherine said, turning the word over in her mouth like an exotic fruit. "It sounds like a dream." Ethan pulled her into his arms. "A new start, far enough that no one would find us. But so far from everything we've known." "We have each other," Ethan said simply. "That's all I need to know." The decision made, they spent the next few days preparing for the journey. Marisol helped Katherine sew sturdy traveling clothes, while Antonio paid Ethan for his work with the horses enough money to help them establish themselves in California. The night before they were to leave with the cattle drive, Antonio and Marisol hosted a small feast. The ranch hands gave toasts to the young couple, and there was music and dancing under the stars. As the celebration wound down, Antonio took Ethan aside. "There is one more thing," he said, handing him a folded document. "My wife and I have spoken with Padre Ignacio in the village. If you wish to marry before you go, he will perform the ceremony tomorrow morning." Ethan stared at the paper, a marriage license, requiring only their signatures. "I don't know what to say." Antonio clapped him on the shoulder. "Say nothing to me. Ask your Katherine what she wishes." When Ethan showed Katherine the license, tears filled her eyes. "We would be truly husband and wife," she whispered. "If that's what you want," Ethan said, suddenly uncertain. "I know it's not the wedding you might have dreamed of." Katherine silenced him with a kiss. "It's exactly what I want. To be your wife, before God and whoever else cares to witness it." The next morning, Katherine wore a simple dress that Marisol had helped her make, with wildflowers in her hair instead of a veil. The small adobe church in the village was cool and peaceful as Padre Ignacio performed the ceremony in a mixture of Spanish and English. When they exchanged vows, Katherine's voice was steady, her heart full. This was not the lavish wedding her father might have planned for her in Shafter, with the town's elite in attendance and expensive gifts piled high. Instead, it was intimate and honest, witnessed by people who had taken them in when they had nothing. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," the priest said, his weathered face creasing in a smile. "May God bless your journey together." They left that afternoon with Antonio's son Miguel and 6 other ranch hands, driving 30 head of cattle toward Santa Fe. Katherine rode astride rather than side saddle, wearing split skirts that Marisol had insisted were more practical for the journey. The first days were hard, with long hours in the saddle and the constant dust of the cattle. At night, Katherine and Ethan shared a bedroll slightly apart from the others, who respectfully gave the newlyweds what privacy could be managed on the trail. Under the vast canopy of stars, they consummated their marriage, their whispered words of love mingling with the night sounds of the desert. The journey to Santa Fe took 2 weeks, following a route that deliberately avoided major settlements where word might have spread about the couple from Shafter. Miguel proved a good trail boss, keeping them moving at a steady pace while watching for signs of danger. As they approached Santa Fe, Ethan and Katherine's anxiety grew. The city was larger than any Katherine had ever seen, with a mix of Mexican and American influences evident in its architecture and bustling streets. "We'll need to be careful," Miguel warned them as they prepared to part ways. "The stage-coach office will have papers from Texas. They may be watching for you." Katherine squeezed Ethan's hand. "What do we do?" Miguel grinned. "My cousin's wife left some of her clothes at our camp last night. Put them on and let me cut your hair. You will become a Mexican señora, not an American banker's daughter." The transformation was remarkable. With her hair cut short, her skin darkened by the sun, and dressed in the colorful skirt and blouse of a Mexican woman, Katherine looked nothing like the proper young lady who had fled Shafter. "What about Ethan?" she asked, turning to her husband. Miguel assessed him critically. "The beard helps. Keep your hat low, speak little, and let your wife do the talking." He handed Katherine a small leather pouch. "My father sent this, for your tickets west." Katherine opened it to find gold coins, far more than Antonio had already paid Ethan for his work. "We can't accept this," she protested. Miguel shrugged. "My father says consider it a wedding gift, and perhaps someday you will help someone else who needs a new beginning." They parted at the edge of town, the cattle drive continuing to its destination while Katherine and Ethan made their way to the stage-coach office. Katherine's heart pounded as she purchased tickets to Sacramento, speaking in the careful Spanish she had learned at the Rodriguez Ranch. The clerk barely glanced at them, busy with the day's transactions. "Stage leaves tomorrow morning, 6 o'clock sharp." They found a small room at a boarding house run by a deaf old woman who asked no questions and simply took their money with a nod. That night they lay awake, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the city around them. "We're really doing this," Katherine whispered. "Leaving everything behind." Ethan pulled her closer. "Not everything, we have each other." The stage-coach journey was grueling, long days of jolting travel over rough roads, nights in crude way stations with poor food and hard beds. Other passengers came and went, most ignoring the quiet couple who kept to themselves and spoke little. A week into their journey, at a stop in Arizona Territory, Katherine noticed a man watching them too intently. He wore the clothes of a cattle buyer, but his eyes had the sharp look of a lawman. "Heading to California?" he asked casually as they waited for fresh horses. Ethan nodded, keeping his responses minimal as Miguel had advised. "Lot of people heading west these days," the man continued. "Running to something or away from something." Katherine stepped forward, placing a protective hand on Ethan's arm. My husband's cousin has a farm, she said in accented English. We go to help with the harvest. The man's eyes narrowed slightly, but he nodded. Safe travels, then. When the stage departed, he remained at the station, and Katherine felt a cold knot of fear in her stomach. He was looking for us, she whispered. Ethan nodded grimly. Words traveled further than we thought. At the next stop, they made a difficult decision. Rather than continuing on the main stage route, they used some of Antonio's gold to buy a small wagon and supplies. We'll take the southern route, Ethan explained as he loaded their meager possessions. Longer, but less traveled, fewer eyes watching. The new journey was slower but safer, taking them through small settlements and empty stretches of desert and mountain. Katherine learned to drive the wagon while Ethan rode ahead, scouting the trail and hunting for food when their supplies ran low. The weeks blended together, marked by small moments of beauty and hardship shared. They crossed rivers swollen with summer rain, navigated mountain passes where the air grew thin and cold, and traversed stretches of desert where the sun beat down mercilessly. Katherine's body grew stronger, her skin tanned dark by the sun, her hands calloused from work. She no longer resembled the sheltered banker's daughter from Shafter. When she caught her reflection in a stream one day, she hardly recognized herself, leaner, harder, but with clear eyes that held a confidence she'd never possessed before. Ethan changed too. His responsibility as protector and provider softened by moments of tenderness that surprised them both. At night, he would point out constellations to her, telling stories he'd learned from an old Mexican vaquero who had once worked his father's forge. "That's Cygnus," he said one clear night as they lay beside their small fire. "The swan. See how it looks like it's flying down the Milky Way." Katherine snuggled against him, following his pointing finger. "It's beautiful. I never really looked at the stars in Shafter." "Too many lamps in town," Ethan agreed. "Out here, there's nothing between us and the heavens." It was during these quiet moments that Katherine would sometimes think of her father, wondering if he would have eventually accepted Ethan had he lived. She thought of the friends she'd left behind, the comfortable life she'd abandoned. But when she looked at Ethan, at the life they were building together day by day, she knew she had made the right choice. Nearly 2 months after leaving the Rodriguez ranch, they crossed into California. The landscape changed, becoming greener and more varied. They began to see more travelers on the road, more settlements dotting the countryside. "We're almost there," Ethan said one evening as they made camp within sight of the Sierra Nevada mountains. "Another week, maybe less, and we'll reach Sacramento." Katherine stirred the beans cooking over their fire. "Do you think Antonio's cousin will truly have work for you? If not, I'll find something else. California's growing. They need men who know horses." He paused, watching her face. "Are you afraid?" She considered the question. "Not afraid exactly, just we've been traveling so long, it's hard to imagine staying in one place again." Ethan nodded in understanding. "It'll be different this time. We'll be building something that's ours, not living by someone else's rules." The next morning, as they packed their camp, Katherine suddenly doubled over, a wave of nausea overwhelming her. Ethan was at her side instantly, his face creased with concern. "What's wrong? Are you sick?" Katherine took a deep breath, waiting for the nausea to pass. "I'm fine, it's just I've been feeling this way for a few mornings now." Ethan's eyes widened as understanding dawned. "Katherine, are you?" She nodded, a mixture of fear and joy flooding through her. "I think so. I've missed my monthly time twice now." Ethan stared at her in wonder before a broad smile spread across his face. He whooped loudly, lifting her off her feet and spinning her in a circle. "Careful," she laughed. "I'm delicate now, remember." He set her down gently, his hands moving to rest protectively over her still flat stomach. "A baby," he whispered. "Our baby." The realization added urgency to their journey. They needed to reach Sacramento to find work and a home before the baby came. They pushed harder, traveling longer hours each day, stopping only when exhaustion demanded it. 5 days later, they crested a hill and saw the sprawling town of Sacramento spread before them, the river glinting in the late afternoon sun, buildings and tents stretching in all directions. "It's so big," Katherine breathed. Ethan nodded, equally awed by the bustling city. "Bigger than anything back home." They made their way toward the address Antonio had given them, navigating the busy streets with their small wagon. Katherine marveled at the diversity of the people. They passed Chinese laborers, Mexican traders, European immigrants, and Americans from every state in the Union. Antonio's cousin, Gabriel Rodriguez, lived on a modest ranch just outside the city limits. When they arrived, dusty and exhausted from their long journey, he welcomed them with open arms. "Antonio sent a letter months ago," he explained as he showed them to a small guest cabin. "Said you were good people who needed a fresh start." In the days that followed, Gabriel helped Ethan find work with a horse trader who supplied animals to the mining operations in the hills. The pay was good, and the owner, a gruff New Englander named Bartholomew Jenkins, cared more about Ethan's skill with horses than his past. "Don't know where you learned to gentle a horse like that," Jenkins said after watching Ethan work with a particularly difficult Mustang. "Don't much care either, long as you keep doing it." Katherine found her place too, helping Gabriel's wife Lucia with the household and learning about the garden that supplied much of their food. When she told Lucia about the baby, the older woman embraced her warmly. "A child is God's greatest blessing," she said, pressing a hand to Katherine's stomach. "This one will be born free in a place where old hatreds do not follow." By the time winter came to California, milder than any winter Katherine had known in Texas, they had saved enough to put a down payment on a small piece of land not far from Gabriel's ranch. It wasn't much, 10 acres with a run-down cabin and a small barn, but it was theirs. "Our home," Ethan said proudly as he carried Katherine across the threshold of the cabin. "No one can take it from us." They spent the cold months repairing the cabin, making it weathertight and comfortable for the baby's arrival in the spring. Ethan continued working for Jenkins, while Katherine prepared for motherhood, sewing tiny garments and learning from Lucia about childbirth and infant care. In late February, as the first wildflowers began to appear in the meadows around their home, a rider arrived with a letter. It had traveled a long, circuitous route from Shafter to El Paso, then to Santa Fe, and finally to Sacramento, following the trail of rumors and sightings of the young couple who had fled in the night. Katherine's hands trembled as she opened it, recognizing Judge Hamilton's precise handwriting on the envelope. "Dear Miss Osborne," it began, still using her maiden name, "I write to inform you that developments in Shafter have occurred which may be of interest to you." She read the letter aloud to Ethan, her voice growing stronger with each paragraph. The judge explained that 3 months after her departure, the new bank manager had discovered discrepancies in the accounts that implicated Mayor Prescott in embezzling railroad funds. The mayor had attempted to flee, but was captured and confessed to killing Harold Osborne to prevent him from exposing the theft. "Your father's name has been cleared," the judge wrote. "And while many in town still disapprove of your choice to leave with young Steele, there are no legal reasons you could not return, should you wish to claim your inheritance." The letter ended with a request for a response, sent to the judge's office in Shafter. Ethan watched Katherine's face carefully as she finished reading. "Do you want to go back?" he asked quietly. "To claim what's yours?" Katherine placed a hand on her swollen belly, feeling their child move beneath her fingers. She looked around at the small cabin they had built together, at the life they had created far from Shafter's judgments. "This is what's mine," she said firmly. "You, our child, this home. Shafter has nothing I want anymore." Ethan's relief was visible. "You're sure?" she nodded. "But I will write back to the judge. He should know what happened to us, that we're happy and building a good life here." She smiled wryly. "And perhaps knowing my father wasn't a thief after all will help me sleep better at night." The following month, Katherine gave birth to a son they named Samuel, after Ethan's grandfather. He was strong and healthy, with Katherine's chestnut hair and Ethan's blue eyes. As she held her son for the first time, Katherine felt a sense of completion she had never known was possible. In this small cabin, with her husband beside her and their child in her arms, she had found the belonging she had always sought. "He's perfect," Ethan whispered, running a gentle finger over their son's tiny hand. "Yes," Katherine agreed, "he is." Over the next 2 years, their small ranch prospered. Ethan proved to have a talent for breeding and training horses that were ideally suited for the varied terrain of California. Word spread, and soon ranchers from all over the region sought his services. Katherine kept books for their growing business, her education in Shafter finally finding practical use. She also tended a large vegetable garden and kept chickens, enjoying the self-sufficiency that had been impossible in her former life as a banker's daughter. Samuel grew into a sturdy toddler, followed a year later by a daughter they named Maria, in honor of Marisol Rodriguez, who had shown such kindness to 2 desperate strangers. Occasionally, news would reach them from Shafter. Mayor Prescott had been hanged for murder and embezzlement. The railroad had completed its expansion, transforming the small town into a busier trading center. Judge Hamilton had retired, passing his position to a younger man from Austin. These tidings came like dispatches from another world, one that Katherine and Ethan had left behind so completely that it hardly seemed real anymore. On the 5th anniversary of their departure from Shafter, the night they had ridden away at midnight, never looking back, they sat on the porch of their expanded home, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. Samuel and Maria played in the yard, their laughter mingling with the evening birdsong. A new foal pranced in the nearby pasture, showing the spirit and intelligence that had made Steele horses famous throughout the region. "You ever regret it?" Ethan asked, taking Katherine's hand in his. "Leaving everything behind that night?" Katherine looked at their intertwined fingers, both hands now equally work-roughened and sun-darkened. She remembered the terrified young woman she had been, climbing down a trellis in the darkness, fleeing the only home she had ever known. "Not for a moment," she said truthfully. "We found something better than anything Shafter could have offered us. Even with all the hardships, the long journey, the uncertainty," she leaned against his shoulder, watching their children play in the golden light of evening. "Especially with those. They made us who we are now." She squeezed his hand. "And who we are now is exactly who we were meant to be." As night fell over their California ranch, stars emerged in the vast sky above the same stars they had followed westward on their journey to freedom. Katherine thought of all the decisions, large and small, that had led them to this moment of peace and belonging. There had been a time when she believed her future was predetermined by her father, by Shafter society, by the expectations placed upon a banker's daughter. But on that midnight 5 years ago, when Ethan had asked if she trusted him, she had chosen a different path. And now, watching her husband's face in the fading light, seeing the love that still burned as strongly as it had that first night, Katherine knew it had been the right choice. They had created this life together, step by difficult step, building something that belonged only to them. The town had tried to separate them, believing they knew what was best for a young woman of Catherine's position. But a cowboy had ridden away with her at midnight, and neither of them had ever looked back again. Instead, they had looked forward to the horizon, to the future, to the life they would build together. And in that forward gaze, they had found everything they had ever truly wanted.